Ruth Coppinger, 30 seconds to vote.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister, I wanted to ask about the plans of the NTA and, by extension, yourself and this government, because I don't believe there's any independence between the two, to privatise public transport, and in particular the impact on Bus Éireann workers and on commuters from the race to the bottom that you're pursuing, and the rigged system that you seem to be operating, whereby Bus Éireann isn't really allowed to compete at all for its own services.
Thank you. Minister, 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank Deputy Pottinger for the question about Coppinger. Okay, so, Coppinger. Yeah, sorry. The question appears to be about on the tendering of Bus Éireann routes, and to make a statement on it, which I will respond to. I'll respond to the other bit later, if you wish. As Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, I have responsibility for policy and overall funding in relation to public transport. However, I am not involved in the day-to-day operations of public transport or in PSO contract arrangements. It's a statutory function of the National Transport Authority under the DTA Authority Act 2008 and EU Regulation 1370/2007 to determine the appropriate mix of directly awarded and competitively tendered PSO services. In 2015, as part of bus market opening, the NTA sought expressions of interest from public transport operators to operate bus services on certain routes in the Dublin Metropolitan, Dublin Commuter and Waterford areas. This resulted in approximately 10% of PSO services which were operated under direct award by Bus Éireann and Dublin Bus being competitively tendered. As the Deputy is aware, Bus Éireann won the contract for delivery of the Waterford services, which are expected to commence in March 2019. Go Ahead was announced as the winner of the other competitions, including the Dublin commuter competition for certain commuter routes on the Kildare corridor into Dublin, previously operated by Bus Éireann. It is expected that Go Ahead will commence operations on the Kildare corridor routes in Q2 2019. The competitive tendering that has recently been introduced by the NTA into the bus market is happening at the same time as significant growth in public transport services. So the market opening will not give rise to a reduction in employee numbers or in services by Bus Éireann or Dublin Bus, as they both need drivers to operate new expanded timetable on their remaining routes. Of course, these expanded and intensified services by Bus Éireann or Dublin Bus will be subvented by the NTA, so the 10% market opening will not result in a corresponding reduction in their PSO subsidy,
Thank you, Minister.
as might otherwise
the rest of your response
be
will
expected.
be on the public record. Deputy Coppinger, 1 minute.
Well, let's talk about Go Ahead, the company that, under your watch, has been allowed to take over these routes. So Go Ahead start their bus drivers on a €28,000. Can I ask you, Minister, how are you meant to buy a house in this city or any city in this country on a wage like that? The top rate of pay is €32,000. That's 14,000 less than a Bus Éireann worker could earn after a number of years of service. There's no break facilities. Obviously, you think it's fine for a bus driver to pull in and eat a sandwich on the side of the road. And in reality, drivers have been leaving the company en masse. They haven't been able, for example, to take over last week the routes that they were meant to take over. And you know, they're working a 12-hour-a-day roster when 11 hours is meant to be the max. And it's just not going to work, Minister, because you can't operate. We've already seen the Ryanair model falling apart. There's a revolt by workers and employees of that company. I know he's a good friend of yours, against that type of model, and this won't work as well.
Thank you very much. Now you can expand your reply, Minister, 1 minute.
I think Michael O'Leary would be absolutely horrified by that description. I don't think he'd recognise that being the case. I've met him a few times, but to describe him as a good friend of mine is something just inaccurate, and I don't think that should be allowed to. I've never been in his house; he's never been in mine. I think I've met him once for a cup of coffee or a light lunch in the last 25 years, and I've met him on other occasions which have been business-like and nothing else. So please don't let that sort of allegation be thrown across the House in some way, suggesting the Minister is compromised by friendship. It's not true, not the case at all. Let me just answer your question. and some of the things that you've said which are just not correct. You mentioned your opening remark about the privatisation of these routes, of these companies and these routes. There is no privatisation. There is a tendering, which you very accurately referred to in your initial question, which you unfortunately didn't refer to subsequently. There's a tendering process going on, and it's a very fine tendering process going on. And that tendering process is not in any way meant to undermine the incumbents, Dublin Bus or Bus Éireann. That tendering is for the benefit of the consumers and the passengers, and it benefits also the staff. What Go Ahead has done is introduce 425 new jobs and a large investment in the Irish economy. That is something which we must welcome. It's something which you should welcome as well. And it is in no way meant to be a privatisation of anything. No assets are changing hands, Deputy. This is just operators tendering for new routes, which some they're getting, and the incumbents are getting some as well.
Final comment, Deputy.
Minister, Bus Éireann underbid Go Ahead by 3 million, but Go Ahead was still given the contract. So it seems to be a rigged system. The NTA doesn't want Bus Éireann to be able to maintain its own routes. They're not allowed to compete in reality. What's happening is a fragmenting of the network. Bus Éireann is expected to show a profit, actually, despite all of the challenges of the NTA increasing licences and curtailing expressway. The NTA guidelines are meant to be cognisant of the public service obligation. That doesn't seem to have been the case in relation to Go Ahead. At least with Bus Éireann, you know, the surplus money is reinvested into the economy. With Go Ahead and the likes of those companies, but specifically with them, 83% of it is stock market owned. And what's going to happen is that the public service, the taxpayer, in effect, will end up subsidising these jobs, because a lot of the workers will have to claim family income supplement. And, you know, the way that you've nobbled Dublin Bus as well, it's only allowed to make a profit of £1 million Cathaoirleach and to run its fleet on that. The NTA takes anything above that. So Dublin Bus increased its passengers, it generated revenue of 20 million, and the NTA takes back 19 million. How is that allowing the public service in any way to compete? And Minister, you may not be a friend, I'll rephrase that, but you're certainly an admirer, and you've tweeted very approvingly about the activities of the Ryanair boss. Just vote with the worst boss in history. My concern is for workers and also for commuters who won't be able to have services when they need them.
Thank you. Just before the Minister comes back in, I didn't think this question was about Michael O'Leary or Michael O'Leary at all. It's about tendering of Bus Éireann routes. So, you know, let's stick with it. So, Minister, you have a final minute, and we're going way over time on this question.
Yeah, you're quite correct. It wasn't about that, but I couldn't allow that statement to be left on the record.
Okay, well.
But I didn't introduce that. To say I've tweeted admiringly about him is equally fatuous. I've tweeted admiringly about the Greek government, the socialist Greek government as well. You know, and that is a completely different area of the political spectrum, and I'm sure they believe in a lot of the same things as Deputy Coppinger. But that's as may be. Let me just point out that the whole, thank God, the public transport is expanding. Bus Éireann is expanding. Dublin Bus is expanding. The number of passengers travelling on them is expanding. Go Ahead is entering a market and hopefully is doing well, because it's accommodating a large number of passengers, a growing number of passengers, which it's absolutely essential to accommodate. And happily, there is room for all, both the incumbent and for its competitors.
Thank you,
and its new operations in this new environment. And we should be saying, thank God that we've got Go Ahead to do this, to compete and to improve by competition the lot of the passengers, to keep fare downs, to help consumers, and indeed to give more jobs.
Look, can I just